being tough. FEMA, let's talk about FEMA. We're gonna spend 10 minutes on FEMA. The question is, why is FEMA, I'm putting my timer on, got my timer on, why is FEMA continuing to run out of money? Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let's get to it.
Southwest states are devastated by Hurricane Helene. They will need billions of dollars in disaster aid to just get back on their feet. Earlier this week, President Joe Biden said he was considering calling Congress back to pass disaster relief funding. Joining us now to discuss all this and, of course, FEMA is the Deputy Director, Rachel O'Brien, the Deputy Public Policy Editor for OpenTheBooks.com. Hi, Rachel.
Good morning.
Good morning. What is going on with FEMA and money? I mean, some of this is a little bit alarming. The fact that FEMA could be running out of money, may not have enough money to cover hurricane relief for the rest of the season. And then, of course, the fiscal problems even before Helene. Is FEMA underwater at this point?
Right. Yes. So the most recent report from the Office of the Inspector General found that FEMA's disaster fund had a $6 billion deficit at the end of July. And so Maycus said either yesterday or today, FEMA doesn't have enough money to get through the hurricane season.
Do y'all know who Maycus is? I know who Maycus is from the migrant crisis, because Maycus essentially runs everything Homeland Security. But then I didn't realize that I had been seeing Maycus for a long time. Do y'all know where y'all usually see Maycus? I'm going to do a test in the chat before I give y'all the answer. The test in the chat is, where do you usually see Maycus? Where do you usually see Maycus? Where do you usually see Maycus? I know him because I had been doing review videos of what was going on in the migrant crisis and the fact that he was basically the face of not controlling what was happening at the border. Where do you usually see Maycus? I want to hear what y'all got to say in the chat. And so they was calling for his firing, but I didn't realize that Maycus was over the director of FEMA. He was also over what was going on as far as security for the president and all of that stuff. Where do you usually see Maycus? Y'all say Congress, and before Congress, he was out shopping in LA. He needs to be fired. He a slime ball. He from New York. Nope, all of y'all wrong. The border, Capitol Hill, Homeland Security, Congress hearings, Gucci store. Nope, y'all all wrong. I can't believe nobody is getting it right. Yes, you finally got it. Somebody got it right. Somebody got it right. Shout out to Dane. Shout out to Dane. Yep, you are 100% right. You see him at the airport. Why? Because when you're going through TSA, if you look up on the screen, and I didn't even realize this until I was going through the airport the last time, because I remember seeing him on the screen at the TSA all the time. And if you're going through the airport and you look up on the screen and they're trying to give you the directions, hey, you got to throw away all of your liquids and Homeland Security, if you see something, say something. He's always on the screen on the little monitors at the airport before you walk through TSA. That is Maycus. Yes, he is giving you an announcement on the screen at the TSA to let you know that you will be safe, and we have to make sure that we protect our airplanes and our borders and our border security and everything like that. And he usually appears at the airport when you're going through TSA. And I didn't realize it until I seen him, and I was like, oh, that's the guy. He's been giving us announcements the entire time. He is at the airport. Dane, you are on the money. That's how I know I got a dope chat. That's how I know that I got a dope chat. Yep. He is at the airport, usually on the screen for the TSA and Homeland Security, and he's giving you an announcement, guys. Hey, how you doing? I'm Director of Homeland Security, and we have to be safe. He is on, yes, he is. He's on every terminal. In every state, yes, he is. So that is the person that has been given a warning about the fact that FEMA is going to be running out of money because they don't have enough to sustain them through the hurricane season. Now, the reasons for that, we're going to find out.
President Biden has requested more funds in the past. Last October, he asked for about $24 billion, $9 billion of it for FEMA. Congress was busy giving aid to Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and other places. They did not pass that funding for FEMA. And so part of this is FEMA's fault. They have this pot of funds of unliquidated obligations that it's referred to. It's to help victims of storms from before 2012. And it's just sitting there. It's not being used. It's money that has been promised, but it's unclear whether it will ever go to help American families. And meanwhile, that money is not right now allowed to use to help victims of Helene or any other hurricane. So it's sort of stuck in purgatory, and FEMA's got to figure out how to get that money out.
So why is it stuck? Why is it just sitting there? Is this some sort of a legal requirement? Is it mandated by Congress? I mean, why can't that money move?
So the money is not supposed to be sitting that long, and not without a good reason. FEMA is not following their own procedures properly. They're required to use grants by a certain deadline. If that deadline is extended, then FEMA officials have to give a written detailed justification. But they've been holding on to these funds. They've been extending deadlines, sometimes without explanation. So, for example, FEMA set aside billions to help the Northeast recover from Hurricane Sandy in 2012. That money was supposed to be used by 2016. FEMA, for some reason, extended that until 2026, 10 years later. As of last year, $5 billion of that was still sitting there, still unused. They're not making it available for new victims. They're not releasing those funds. The Inspector General, Homeland Security, has said that FEMA has been extending these awards subjectively. And they said, as a result, there's a risk for fraud, waste, and abuse the longer the program remains open. So FEMA needs to get its act together and get this money out of there, especially as we see Helene and Maycus just said, we're running out of money for this hurricane season.
All right, so wait a minute. You telling me that FEMA already be having funds, because I'm learning something new. Because you don't know until you start to get visibility into it, until some natural disaster happens, and then they say, hey, we ain't got no more money. And then they be like, where all of the money? Oh, wait a minute, we found some more money. It's over in this account. So you telling me that we as the taxpayers actually pay into a system that then allocate money, budget money for disasters and this and that and Sandy and Helene and all of these things, right? And they earmark it for it. And so one of the things that I'm really, really excited for, hopefully, because I hope that they implement it, and I already know that Trump is going to win. It's going to be a wash. It's going to be an absolute wash. But here's the thing that I'm interested in. One thing that he said from a policy lens or a policy perspective that he said is, we need to have more of an audit into the federal government to see where all of this money is going. I don't like the fact that they keep raising taxes, and their solution to everything is to raise taxes, raise taxes, raise taxes, raise taxes. You'll see later on in the show that Brandon Johnson's new proposal for fixing what's going on in Chicago and these budget deficit is to what? Raise taxes again. Raise some more taxes. And I don't believe that the federal government is as efficient as they're supposed to be. They should be running the federal government with the same lean principles as Toyota manufacturing. I don't want nobody that's in the federal government that's not a black belt in Lean Six Sigma. Some of y'all may not be familiar with that. That's before your time. You don't understand it. You don't need no lean principles. You don't know about what being a black belt is and all of this stuff. That almost used to be a requirement to get into executive leadership when you was in a manufacturing base. And then they would take people that were experts in lean manufacturing, and then they would go into different industries, and they would implement those same principles, but it was championed by and celebrated because they use these same lean principles to out-manufacture and then get better quality than the United States automakers, and that's how Toyota then became a powerhouse in the United States of America, is that not only did they make better cars, but they lasted longer and they had less manufacturing defects because you were a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, right? And so I don't want anybody to come into the federal government running anything unless you are business savvy, you understand, and then you know how to run a lean manufacturing environment so that we can start to figure out where all of this money and root out the waste. And one of the things, again, that I was very excited for as a policy is that when Trump said, listen, the first thing that we need to do is we need to audit every single department in the federal government, and it needs to be led by Elon Musk, somebody that's an outsider, so we can drain the swamp. Because what I'm hearing now in my C students' ears, what I'm basically hearing right now is waste, laundering, stealing, and they can justify it by saying that, well, you know what? We allocated it over here. We allocated it over there. Man, that's fraud. That's fraud. You telling me we paying into a system. We should have so much visibility into where our monies and our tax monies is going. If we had a basic site, if I'm in any branch of the federal government, right? I don't care if I'm a governor. I don't care if I'm a mayor. The fact that we're still using PDF documents to do budget proposals and then negotiate it and get it approved to where the people have no clue where monies is going, and we put trillions every single year, trillions of dollars into the tax system, and y'all not concerned with how y'all money is being used, but then they could just say, hey, we need to tax people more to make sure that we shore it up. Why isn't there an interactive site with all of the AI and the infrastructure and all of the government contracts and things that we have? The first thing that anybody should do when they get elected, going 2025 and forward, is there should be some site or an app that you can go to and you can see easily interactive and visibility and to be able to scan through and then filter through exactly where your money's is going and where it's going. You would eliminate so much waste. You would eliminate so much fraud. You would eliminate so many people that's taking advantage of the system. And if you could see it with your eyes, we would make better decisions as voters. If you could see it, if you could touch it, if you could feel it. See, them just saying it, oh, we going to give money to this, and we need to do. Oh, man, they can't get a federal budget approved. Hey, FEMA money and all of that. If you seen where the money was going, I guarantee you would make better decisions as to who you voted for. But because we don't have any visibility into it, we don't know it until you get a disaster like what happened over in North Carolina, and they say, hey, man, we under. Oh, wait a minute, we got some money over there. That's what they was doing with the COVID funds. In every city, they was doing the same thing with the COVID funds. You know why all of the teachers is getting laid off? The teachers are getting laid off because they were using a boost in COVID money. They allocated money over here to say, hey, man, we need to make sure that we shore up over here and shore up over there. And these people ain't working right now. And so we need to make sure that we boost education and spending and get everybody iPads because all of the kids is from home. And so they allocated all of these trillions of dollars in COVID money to these different states and to these different programs. And they leaned on that and they baked it into their budget. And that's how they justified being able to keep all of these people on the staff instead of learning how to manage their budget more effectively and looking at that as just a boost instead of depending on it. And now they bake that into their budget and they say, oh, wait a minute, we got to lay everybody off. This is because you don't manage your funds correctly. That's why I don't trust Kamala Harris. I don't trust Tim Walz. They've never worked in the private sector. They don't know how to manage a budget. She throwing out stuff without even saying how to pay for it because it sounds good to your ears, but you can't justify it. In every business, you got to justify where your spending is going. The reason why we fill out timesheets, the reason why we put all of this stuff in there, the reason why these different managers and different segments of business can say, hey, we need this, we need this, we need to allocate money to this. This is going to be a driver in profitability long term, so we need to allocate monies into this, and we need to make sure that we have this much for contractors and all of this other stuff, is because you need to be able to justify where your spending is. If it doesn't match up and you don't get a return on your money, then that's where you shave, and that's where you got to figure out how to sell off that part of the business, because maybe another business does it well and they want your customers, but it doesn't necessarily translate into profitability for you because you don't have the budget to do so. When you look at the auto manufacturing process, right? The reason why they're spending so much money on ICE vehicles, right? They're using ICE vehicles to then justify the research and development that goes into electronic vehicles because they have these mandates coming. So they have to sell as many cars as possible, as many trucks as possible. When you see the markups and the margins aren't that high, is because they allocating so much money into research and development trying to drive the cost down of EV vehicles and battery manufacturing so that they can then justify the investment into it. And they also got to build the infrastructure for it. And that's why you see the $7,500 tax credits, is because they're trying to incentivize you to go into this area while at the same time giving automakers enough time to make profits from ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles, to then feed those profits into hopefully going into EVs so then they can justify the cost. But if you actually break down the numbers and you're on these analyst calls, which is one of the reasons why in the Patreon, I go through, I show you the charts, I help you to understand exactly how these budgets is allocated and why we invest in this and why we don't invest in that. And this segment is different than that segment. And Apple over there, yeah, they're using an iPhone and they know that the market is fully mature, but that market is then funding their growth in other segments such as services, like when they go in and they give you Apple Pay, right? And you go in and you do your Apple Fitness and all of that. That's the fastest growing segment in Apple, whereas they're funding that because they understand that that's where all of the benefits is going to come long term, but they need this money over here in order to do so. So when you operate the federal government with the same efficiency that you operate in a private business, and most of these politicians don't know nothing but policy, they don't know nothing but asking for money. They don't know nothing but begging. When you operate with the same efficiency, then you get an efficient government. You'll have less government in your lives and you'll actually have your funds allocated to the things that's meaningful. You don't need a whole bunch of money in social services if you're building up a strong manufacturing base that allows people to be able to provide for themselves. You don't need that. So when I see people say, hey, we ran out of money in FEMA, we ran out of money in this, we ran out of money in that, that means that it's a budget problem. It's a management problem. That's not a shortage of funds. It's not a shortage of funds. It's not an inflation problem. We effectively give the federal government a loan every single year that you're paying taxes, and then they make money off of your money, and then they give you a refund in April of next year, but you've paid into the system hoping that they give it back to you. They're making money on your money, but you don't ask questions because you vote Democrat or Republican. And then when we then need the money to do things that's meaningful, you don't question it because, that's just FEMA funds. No, that's your money. Every single thing that the federal government do is your money. We should not be having questions as to how they're allocating your money. And if we don't start being mindful, and this is the problem with allowing for everybody to be able to vote, just because you're an American, you can vote. No, you need to be an informed voter, because if you don't know, how can you then make a decision that's best for you when you operate out of ignorance and you're electing people based off of identity politics? Of course, I would rather have Trump in there, because at the very least, if you look at a CEO, right, the CEO is not supposed to be the expert of everything, but the CEO is supposed to be great at putting the right people in place. Who better to put that in place than Trump? You gonna trust Kamala Harris to be able to manage your budget effectively, and she's never even worked in the private sector? How does that work? How can you have a person that serve all people when her only experience is to tell you that her mother knew a woman that basically played a role in her life that owned a daycare? And we're voting this woman to be the commander-in-chief. How? How? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The number one thing that I think need to happen, and Trump proposed it, he said it unexpectedly, and it just went over everybody's heads. The number one thing that I think needs to happen in the United States of America is we need to audit the federal government in every single sector. Don't raise another tax. Don't add another tax. Not another tax. We tax gas, we tax groceries, we tax people. Don't you realize that we getting triple taxed, quadruple taxed? By the time that you get your next paycheck, the government basically got all of the monies. Well, Anton, how does that work? Well, listen, you work, you get a W-2, you get taxes taken out of your check. Let's say you make $100,000 a year and they take 20% of it, right? So now $20,000 goes into taxes. Cool. And then the money that you taxed on go to the gas station with to fill up your car. And you got to pay a gas tax that's baked into the cost of what you went to go fill up your car. So then a percentage of that money goes back into it. And then you pay somebody because, you know what? I need a contractor to come over to my house and do some work. So you pay him $1,000 to do whatever it is that he do. And then he got to pay taxes off of the money that he got from you that was already taxed to go back to the federal government again. And then the home that you pay for, right, that's already paid for after you paid it off, you got to then pay property taxes into a system so that they can then pay employees that got to pay taxes off of the money that they made from the federal government from monies that you paid into the tax system to go back to the federal government again. By the time that y'all get done spending, and that's why they want the monies to stay circular within the system, because it all comes back to the federal government, you've been taxed. Your entire paycheck goes to the federal government, because even when you spending it with people that's in your community, they paying taxes on taxes to do taxes to get taxed again on stuff that you already been taxed for. So when I look at these federal government agencies and they so inefficient, the system is set up for you, if you don't understand how money works, to basically fund the federal government. And you don't even pay attention to it because you so focused on thinking that you got up because you got a STEMI check. You got a STEMI check. You giving all of your money to the federal government and you don't even know it. But see, I don't have these type of conversations because it's just going to go, whoo, whoo, whoo. And you know what they're going to do? They still going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. They still going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. I could break it down as simple as ever. I'm a C student, straight up. Look at all of my transcripts. I'll bring them up here. All of my transcript says 2.0, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5. I think my best semester I did a 3.2. That brought me up there. But I know where my money is going. I could break it down for you like a C student. And guess what? You still going to vote the way that you want to vote. You know why? Because you like being voluntarily ignorant and you think that they know what to do better with your money than you do. Nah. That's not what it's for, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. It's not what it's for, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So when I see this woman up here with no lips explaining to me how the federal government is short on funds for FEMA for hurricanes, it disgusts me. It absolutely disgusts me.
And that's the thing. I mean, you see the images on our newscasts of so many people, communities devastated, and in some cases, as you're mentioning, the money is there. So what if FEMA, so what can Congress do? What can lawmakers do? What can the president do? Can they put pressure? I mean, it's all a part of the federal government. So what needs to happen in order to get that money out of there?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, on top of those unspent funds, FEMA had a field day paying for COVID expenses. They improperly budgeted their COVID expenses during the pandemic. They spent way over than what they budgeted. That's also part of the problem, why they're in such a deep hole. Biden has said he may call Congress back in. They're in a recess right now. It's election season. So members of Congress are back in their districts. They're campaigning. And so hopefully the pressure will mount on Biden to bring Congress back and get this money passed. That's what they need. Congress would have to come back. They did pass a sort of stopgap funding measure to give $20 billion to FEMA before they left. That's not enough. $6 billion of that alone was going to address other pent-up demands from previous, floods in Vermont, the wildfires in Hawaii. So not all of that can go to hurricanes. And then FEMA also put in August, they put on hold sort of longer term projects, rebuilding projects to focus on immediate.
It's all just fun. It's all charades. It's all fun and games. And it's all a charade. If y'all not a part of the Patreon, make sure y'all tap into the Patreon. I'm going to give y'all some real game this weekend. This is why this is the best morning show on earth. This is why this is the best morning show on earth, is because I don't have to stick to a script. I could just tell you the truth. We could have fun, we could be entertaining, and then I could tell you the truth. If your grandmother, if your mother, if your father, if your friends and your family watch anything other than the Millionaire Morning Show in the morning, tell them that they're missing out.